Mind Your King. And we had a little introduction back 4th of July, actually, so it's been a little while. But want to kind of start into the book tonight with chapters 1 and 2. If we don't get to chapter 2, that's fine. But I think we've kind of gone through chapter 1, and probably everybody's read that multiple times by now if you've had a book. So hope you have, and I hope you continue reading. There's a lot of good articles in the back that we'll touch on, but may not go through describing in this class or have a class lecture on or anything. So be sure and read those. There's 13 of them in the back there, and they're vital to this book. So please do that. Before we begin this evening, I've asked Steve Long if he'd lead us in a word of prayer. When your mind thinks about Bible authority, what do you go to? No right or wrong answer. What do you go to? Anyone? The Bible? Okay. What else? What do you think about Bible authority, Gary? Okay. Yeah. We'll get into that a little tonight, so hopefully. So, anyone else? Drew, what do you think when you think Bible authority, since you're in the other side now? Okay. All right. We'll talk about that too. I recently heard a sermon that Eva turned me on to from Mark Roberts down at Westside Church of Christ in Texas, that other state. And he had an illustration for Bible authority as being a jigsaw puzzle. We have any jigsaw puzzle putter-togethers? What do you do first when you put a jigsaw puzzle together? Perfect. That's exactly what his illustration was. When we look at Bible authority and this, especially this lesson, we're going to look at building the frame of this jigsaw puzzle of Bible authority. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at building the frame. And then we'll add the parts and pieces in the middle. Everybody knows I have cattle. The first thing that happens when I buy a new cow, it runs to the fence line and runs every fence around the edge because it wants to know the boundaries. We are no different. We want to know the boundaries. We want to know what are the concepts, what's happening to me here, what is necessary, what do I need. Now, invariably, since it's a barbed wire fence, they stick their head through the barbed wire fence and eat grass on the other side. You ever seen that? I've got good corn in the middle of the field, and yet they will still eat the weeds in the ditch. That's somewhat Bible authority or Bible illustration, I guess, of authority sometimes. We still don't necessarily grasp the concepts sometimes. I want you to know that God had a pattern from day one. God had a pattern from day one. So when we go through this study, think about that. And that was part of Mark's lesson too, is that pattern is one of three tenets he had of the most important for Bible authority is God has a pattern. God has a plan. And God hasn't changed that pattern or plan. We even see it from Genesis over into Hebrews and Revelation of the concepts that we're going to study. We go through this lesson. Somebody read for me that Isaiah 52:7, and then somebody get Romans 10:15, and we're going to go just have a brief thought here on. Anybody? Okay. And then again in New Testament, Romans 10. The key concept is of any of that is God reigns. God is the ruler. And from that Isaiah 52:7, we mentioned this the last time we talked about authority. What does a good leader provide? What's those three tenets there in that verse? 52:7. Okay? Well, in 52:7, they proclaim peace. He offers peace. They proclaim good things, happiness, we might say. And what's that final thing? Salvation. Those are three primary examples of God. He provides peace, He provides happiness, He provides salvation for His people. So as we go through this study, we'll keep referring back to that Isaiah 52:7. And where does God rule? Okay? Not limited, is He? That's kind of what I wanted to point. He's not limited in His rule. There's no limits to His rule. He created. So He's unlimited in His rule. Why does authority matter? Somebody get for me Genesis 1:1. He's creator. He is the creator. He was not created. but he is our creator. He has the right to tell his creation what to do, how to live, by being the creator. A lot of people have a problem with that. So they think of all the other things that we can do, that we weren't created, we just evolved. Even though we've got to have a beginning for truth. Yes? Okay? Yep. And we're going to see that. Get there. Also, another big tenet is Jesus is king. Christ is king, but what else do we know about Christ? Okay? Okay? So he's right there. He's not, he is not created. He was there with God. So he's part of God. So when we think Christ, we need to think that. Also, in Colossians 1:18, what is he? Bruce, do you have that? Colossians 1:18. If we call ourselves Christian and we're in the church, he is our head. He is the head of the church. That he has the preeminence of this body of Christians. So these are all just, and also, when you mention the word, Gary, that's the Holy Spirit. He's also, what does the Holy Spirit do? Okay? And that word is what we might consider to be the will of God or the mind of God. He is that we get the Bible from. This is what we have. This is what we're going to build that jigsaw frame out of, is what's been revealed to us. That's our starting point. Yes? Yep. Yeah. Going to be no doubt when it comes. Somebody get 1 Corinthians 2 and read 10 through 13. This is going to be an interactive class, so be on your toes and look ahead. Okay. We have that revealed to us. We have the mind of God revealed to us. We think recently we had a preacher among us that basically described the Bible as being basic instructions before leaving earth. That's what we have. We have the mind of God revealed to us for mankind. And this is what we need to follow, is what's been revealed to us. Somebody look at 2 Peter 1 and 20 and 21. Okay. So that gives us another assurance that what we have written down for us is from the Holy Spirit, is from God, about God, for us to follow, not only when we're just practicing our religion, you might say, or just filling this pew, but for our lives. That He's given us all things that pertain to life and godliness. So it's not just, well, we might say, practicing religion. It's for our lives. And it's for our livelihood. Mankind is God's creation. I want to look at this verse a little bit. But look at Jeremiah 10 and verse 23. Somebody read that for me. Right. Somebody get Jeremiah. What does that say about our own personal authority? We're pretty limited, aren't we? We're limited in our understanding. We're neither hot nor cold, I think we're described as sometimes. We're lukewarm at best. We don't have the capacity to direct our own steps from a standpoint of authoritative, or to save ourselves, or to offer ourselves salvation. God has that power. So we need to tap into that power and let this Bible, this will of God, guide us and direct us. That's hard sometimes for, let me say, a selfish human being, such as we all are. We all like our own way, don't we? At any given point in time. We all need our own way at any given point in time. And that's sometimes what makes us unstable. That we want it our way. And God has a better way and a better plan. Okay. Got through that. Had this last time, 2 Corinthians 6, and I won't spend much time here. But what or who is our standard? What? You remember 2 Corinthians 6? Who is our standard? Okay, God is our standard. How are we recognized? How do we we recognize that we have this standard in our lives. Somebody read for me verses 14 through 18. Okay. Don't practice things of the world. Don't be unequally yoked with the world. That's how we know we're not participating in things of the world sometimes. I know we had a recent talk Dylan gave on Jude. Wickedness has existed since Enoch, and it continues today, and will continue into your children's lifetime if he doesn't return. So it's going to happen, but we can't participate in those things or practice such things. And speaking of Jude, somebody read Jude 3 through 11. How can we describe Cain? I put that up there, but how can we describe Cain? What is the way of Cain? Okay. He was what? Jealous? Okay. Somebody didn't follow God's instructions, obviously. Sacrifice wasn't acceptable. What about the error of Balaam? Selfish? Okay. Worldly? I like that. I like the word the author uses here, personal gain. For personal gain. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Wanted him to do. What about the rebellion of Korah? Do you remember that story? Okay. And why did he do that? Or why did okay. Okay. Even though it was set in place by God. So God set it up. What about Adam and Eve's sin? When we think about Adam and Eve, how was their sin described? Didn't like authority? Okay. Okay. Did they not like it, or did they just not trust it? Okay. So when we think about Bible authority, it's going to involve trust. If we accept God's will, we've got to trust Him. And again, that's some of the hard concepts, I guess. But I think we can gain a little bit of insight on sin as rebellion, and why do people generally rebel? Okay. Do they not like it, or do they think they have a better way? Okay. Okay. Yeah, they don't like it, but then they think they've got a better way. Don't call out, but lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. That's the appeal a lot of times for sin. But people generally think they have a better way, or can make a better way. Yes, Ron. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of times we have to trust in what God has said or God has revealed to us. There's going to involve that trust, that acceptance, that continuation, accepting what the Lord has said. why does the will of God matter? And I know we study this a lot, and Drew is real good about Old Testament and bringing out patterns in the Old Testament that carry forward into the New Testament. And I think that's part of the will of God, is that God hadn't changed. God set out his pattern when he made the universe. And again, I'm going to go back to Mark Roberts. God didn't make fish before he made water. He had an order. He had a pattern. And it was logical. There was a logical pattern to follow. And God is a God of patterns all through the Old Testament. I think I mentioned that the tabernacle is picked up over in Hebrews to show us what heaven's like. Pattern for heaven. Of illustration, you might say. Just like this illustration of Bible authority being a jigsaw puzzle, and we're going to build a frame first. This is the same concept. We have an order in our worship. We have an order in our belief. We don't just, I'm going to say a phrase that everybody's probably heard. We're not going to just let go and let God. God has described what we need to do in our worship. We're going to follow that pattern of what God has said we can do to worship Him, to proclaim Him. And also, God desires and accepts obedience to His word. What was Noah told to do? What was Noah told to do? Build an ark. Did he free reign? Okay. Had a pattern. Yes. And that's kind of what this lesson should be about. He's described patterns all through history, for his people from day one. Noah had to build a monstrous floating vessel. I'm going to call it a boat, but it had to float. It had to save 8 souls, of which we have a pattern for baptism. So, also, turn to Joshua 1 and verse 7. Joshua 1 and 7. You know, we sing that song, "Be strong and courageous." And that's all we get. But what's the next line? Do all I've told you, up to that point anyway. Do whatever's in the law. Do whatever the will of God was. So when you sing that song, remember that next line. We're to be strong and courageous in God's will. Not just proud. We have a purpose. Let's see. And also, when we want to be obedient and obey God, we ought to be thankful for patterns. Patterns help us keep straight and narrow. Keeps us in line. Gives us guidance. 2 Timothy 1 and 13. Hold fast the sound words that you have heard. So, break that will of being selfish. Break that will of being, I want it my way. I don't really like doing it that way. But mainly, want to please God in the things that we are doing. And why we are doing them. We should please God in all we do. And do we want to please the Lord or ourselves? Second Peter 1 and 3. It's also complete. It's all we have. It's what we have. But it's enough. Don't trust it. Yeah. Yeah. It's all we need. It's sufficient enough. There's been times in my life when I've doubted because things, even as an elder, sometimes you can ask this gentleman here in some meetings, should I be reading another book? Because you can't believe it's happening, that people aren't following God's will, God's rule. Yeah. Not much. Yeah, not much. Not much after that. Okay. Yes. Yeah. And ultimately, there really is only two ways. Either you believe it and are going to do it, or you don't believe it and you're not going to do it. Nobody's going to get there doing half and half. Nobody's going to get to heaven or get to where they need to be doing half and half. Be selfish. Yes. I think we've answered down to maybe question 5. Why will the question of authority still exist even though we try to deny God's authority? We've probably answered that, but it's going to be hard not to follow somebody's tenets, or even your own tenet. What's the difference between inherent and delegated authority? Does anybody know? Didn't get into that much, but what's inherent authority? Okay. What's delegated authority? Okay. What authority does God have? Okay. He's inherent authority. Only authority, I guess you might say, but he's inherent. Everything else is delegated authority. Even from the standpoint of an eldership is a delegated authority over a specific congregation or group of Christians. There's no inherent authority. Hence, plurality too. They're only delegated authority among anyone else. Government is a delegated authority. Home is a delegated authority in that the roles in the home are delegated. Church, delegated authority. So, and why does God need no further foundation for authority other than himself? And he was not created. He was. He was not created. He was. And is. Yeah, is. I stand corrected. Yeah, that's a difficult concept sometimes. So, okay, chapter 2. I think I mentioned Psalms 2. We'll get into Psalms 2 next week. So look at Psalms 2, also look at Psalms 1, and look at references in the New Testament for the Psalms 2.